And here we have a new concept called a modified internal rate of return, or MIRR. It is an upgraded version of the regular IRR we just learned. And in modified IRR, we assume the cash inflows we made in the future will be reinvested at a reasonable rate. All right, so the reasonable rate would be the cost of capital. If you borrow a loan from a bank at 10%, then we assume you can reinvest and make 10% from somebody else. So that's the market rate of capital. And how do we calculate the modified IRR? In Excel, it's a super duper easy. So you just use the MIRR function, and you're going to choose all the values from a cash flow 0 to the last cash flow. And you have the finance rate, which is your cost of capital, and in this case we put a 10%. And you also have the reinvestment rate, and that's why we are doing this. It is also 10%. Make these two equal to each other. Then you would get your modified IRR. And how do we calculate the modified IRR using the present value or future value of the cash flows? So here is the detailed procedure. In your exam, you don't have to use this expanded version to solve. You just use this MIR function. That was good enough. But for the financial illustration purpose, I have to show you how you get the modified IRR. So these are your cash flows, and you are going to get the future value of all the cash flows. Let's say for the first $10 you make a year later, you're gonna reinvest it and claim it at the end of year 3. So when you reinvest the money, so the $10 will grow at a 10% interest rate raised to the power of 2. That's right, it's not 3, because at the end of year 1, between the end of year 1 to the end of year 3, you only have 2 years in between. You only have 2 years to reinvest your money. So it is actually the total number of years minus your current year. All right. And then for the next cash flow, you will have, let me just make it connect to the cash flow. And for the next cash flow, you just drag it down. You can see the $60 you make at the end of the second year will grow at 10% for 3 minus 2 years. So it only is reinvested for 1 year. So that's going to give you 66. And when you receive $80 at the end of a third year, there's no time to reinvest. You just get the 80. So what will be the terminal value here? So the terminal value is just the summation of the 3 future values of cash flows. All right. So if you invest the money, what rate did I use? I used the 10%, which is your WACC, which is the discount rate used for all the cash flows. And this is a reasonable reinvestment rate. And then I end up with a terminal value of $158. And then I will see what would be my annual return from this $100 investment to $158 terminal value. So what would that be? I will use the rate function. I have 3 years, and the payment is 0. I'm only looking at 2 values, negative 100 and a positive 158. The present value would be negative 100, future value would be 158. And then this is my modified IRR. Okay, it's a 16.5%. Why modified IRR gets better than the regular IRR? Why do we choose a 16.5% instead of 18.1%? If we use 18.1%, then that basically means when we reinvest the money, we will reinvest it at 18%, which is abnormally higher than the market rate of capital. You don't really get 18% just to put your money in the financial market unless you start a new project, the same project like this one, but that's a different story. So this 18% is not reasonable reinvestment rate. But if you use 18.1% at the reinvestment rate here, let me just replace the number. Use 18.1%, lock it, and then I drag it all the way down. You can see that my future value for each cash flow get inflated, which I really are not getting if I'm a realistic person. And the terminal value would get larger. And then when I use the same method to calculate the annual return, it is exactly the regular IRR at 18.1%. Okay, so this is how we use IRR. So when you use a modified IRR, it is better because that assumes a more reasonable reinvestment rate. Okay, and 10% is reinvestment rate, a reasonable one. And here is the PowerPoint instruction. It breaks it down to 4 steps, telling you how to solve for the modified IRR. And I have just shown you in the Excel operation. All right, the next one, the next criteria to judge whether a capital budgeting project is successful or not, this is called a Profitability Index, okay, or PI. It has the same structure as NPV, except the output would not be a positive number or a negative number. It would be a number either greater than 1 or lower than 1. So we use 1 as a criteria. So this is exactly how we do the calculation. We are going to discount each of the future cash flows into present values. It sounds familiar, right? This is exactly what we did with NPV. And then we're going to sum them up. Instead of combining the summation with the negative $100, which is your initial investment at a cash flow 0, we use this number to be divided by the initial cost of 100. All right, and then I will come up with a number of 1.1879. And if a project has a PI, Profitability Index, greater than 1, that means the present value of future cash flows are greater than the initial cost. So this product is good. So as long as the PI is greater than 1, it's good. So you can calculate the PI for both. And in this case, if I want to calculate the PI, all right, so I just use the NPV 10% of all the future cash flows, and then the answer will be divided by the initial cost of the project and add a negative sign, or just simply get the absolute value of it. All right, this is how we get the PI. Okay, so this one is pretty easy to do. The next one is called a payback period. And a payback period basically telling you how long does it take to get your money back. And it is the number of years with fractions sometimes required to recover the project cost. So if you look at project L again, so this is the cash flows, negative 100, 10, 60, 80. And you are going to first get the cumulative cash flow or your ending year balance for each year. Let's say for year 0, your ending cash flow is a negative 100, you're $100 in debt. And in year 1, because you make $10 in this year, your remaining balance is 90 negative, which is a negative 100 plus 10. And after 2 years, you make another 60 added to the ending balance of the previous year. Then your new balance would be negative 30. And in the last year, you make $80, and then your balance eventually becomes positive at 50. You see 80 plus negative 30, that's a 50. So you know that between the second year and the third year, somewhere between here, your money get paid back. And we have a very strong assumption here. we assume the cash flows we receive from each year is evenly distributed across the year. For example, for the third year, you'll receive $80, right? We don't assume we get a lump sum $80 at the very last day, last second of the third year. Instead, we assume this $80 is paid evenly across year 3. Like for the first 5 days, you get $1. The second 5 days or so, you get another dollar, so on and so forth. So the $80 is evenly distributed across a year. So why do we make that assumption? Because if the money is evenly distributed, we will know that at what date of the year or at what part of the year my remaining balance will be paid off. So the fractional part of the third year would be 0.375 or 3/8. That comes from a 30, my remaining balance, divided by the 80, the money I made in the third year. So I'm not going to use my entire third year cash flow to cover this balance. I just use a part of the third year, only less than half of the third year to cover the remaining balance. Okay, so this is how you solve for the fractional part. And for project S, you do the same thing. You get the remaining balance of each year. So at the start, you have a negative 100, and after 1 year passed, you make $70. The remaining balance becomes 30, and then after 2 years, your remaining balance will turn to a surplus from a deficit. So right here, you have a positive number, and you know your payback period is 1 point something. Between the first year and the second year, your negative $100 investment get paid off. And how do you solve for the fractional part? You're going to use the remaining balance at the beginning of the second year divided by the cash flow you made during the second year. So 30 divided by 50, that's a 0.6. So it takes you of the year, this year, to cover your remaining balance. So that's how you solve for payback period. So if we look at the payback periods, it has a strength, it also has weaknesses. So the strength here is it provides an indicator of a product risk and a liquidity. So right here, if you see this project, it takes longer to get your money back. And right here, it takes shorter to get your money back. So this project is definitely safer because it takes a shorter time to get your money back, and shorter time means less uncertainty, less risk. Okay, and it is also easy to calculate. The weaknesses here include it ignores time value of money. Right here, when I do the calculation, 10 added to negative 100, 60 added to negative 90. And you see, I just simply add all the future cash flows to the beginning balance. Although $1 in the future will be worth less than $1 today, $60 in 2 years will be worth less than $60 today, still, I just simply add them up. It's because I ignored the time value of money. All right, and also the regular payback period is has a weakness of ignoring the cash flow after the payback period. Okay, and let me just show you here. Right here, the payback period is 1.6, right? What about in the third year, I make $2 million instead of $20? Okay, right here, I make $2 million. Does that change my payback period? No, because the $2 million I changed, just say 2 million. I make here is after my initial cost is recouped, so it will not be incorporated. All right, but would the $2 million dramatically change my NPV? Definitely yes. Changed from $18 to like $2 million roughly. Would that change my IRR? Definitely yes, but it just simply does not change my payback period. Okay, and also there is no specification of acceptable payback period. Well, as long as your initial cost gets paid back, you're good to go, right? the thing is, again, this ignores the time value of the money. You do not discount it. You do not incorporate the cost of capital when you do the discount. If you don't consider cost of capital, then you miss a lot for the picture of capital budgeting. So you do have to consider the time value of money. All right, how exactly do we solve the drawback or the shortcoming of a regular payback? We developed this term called a discounted payback, which we are going to discount each of the future cash flows into present values. That's the only extra step I'm taking here compared to regular payback. You see $10 discounted to 9.09, $60 discounted to 49.59, so on and so forth. And then I will do the same thing, calculate the remaining balance after each year. I incorporate the new cash flow added to the ending balance at the beginning of each year, and then using the same procedure to solve for the payback periods. The integral part of it, 2 years, and the fractional part of it coming from the third year's cash flow at the present value, of course, divided by the remaining balance. Okay, so in Excel, if we solve for it, and once again, I will use the project L as an example. So what you're gonna do is to get the present value of all the cash flows. So each of them will be divided by 1 plus 10% the cost of capital raised to the power of a year number. All right, so this would be the present values of all the future cash flows. And then I will get the cumulative cash flow for each year. So at the end of today, I'm going to have a negative 100. And then after a year, I will use the remaining balance of last year plus the new contribution of this year. Okay, and then just to drag it all the way down. As you can see, it's between the second year and the third year, my money gets paid back. So my discount payback period is going to be 2 plus something. And then I solve for the fractional part of it. So how do I solve for the fractional part of it? I will use the absolute value, all right, because I don't want the negative sign, positive sign to mess it up. I will use the remaining balance of last year divided by the money I make in the third year, and all at a present value term. Okay, and then just hit enter. This is the discounted payback period, which incorporates the time value of money. As you can see, I discount all the future values into present values and then make a more reasonable summation. And the next subject is non-normal cash flows. And sometimes the cash flows are normal. You have a cost at the beginning, and then you will have a positive cash flows in the end. And when you have a non-normal cash flow, that means you may encounter the change of signs in the future, sometimes positive, sometimes negative for the future cash flows. And some examples would include nuclear power plant or strip mine. They sometimes lose money across the year or require additional investment for maintenance, and that's going to incur cost for future cash flows. Okay, so right here, if you have negative, positive, positive all the way, that's a normal. And if it is positive, negative, and then negative, and that's non-normal. If the sign, so the bottom line is for a non-normal to occur, you would have change of the signs at least once. So right here, you change it just once, so that's normal. Change it once, that's normal. But here, change 1, 2, 3, 4 times. That's not normal. Right here, you change 1 time, 2 times, so that's not normal. And when you have non-normal cash flows, this could be an issue. you would have a problem solving for IRR. If this is your cash flow, negative 100, negative 800 today, 5 million positive year one, negative 5 million year two, and you try to solve for NPV, you would get a valid answer. But if you try to solve for IRR, bad for you, it will be a error output. Why would that be? If you look at this NPV curve, you will see that you actually have two IRRs. One IRR is 25% and another IRR is 400%. This comes all the way to the definition of IRR, which is the discount rate that forces your NPV to be zero. So basically, when the IRR is 25%, you put it as the discount rate for the cash flows of negative 800,000, 5 million, negative 5 million. With a 25% discount rate, you will get a zero NPV. With a 400% discount rate, you will get a zero NPV as well. So this is the case. You have two IRRs, and that's gonna confuse you, and you are not gonna make a good decision when you have two IRRs. And that is also one of the shortcomings of IRR. And when you face that, you better use the NPV as the only criteria to judge. Okay, I'm not going to teach you how to solve for each of the different IRRs. The two IRRs is not really necessary. So just remember, whenever you have an arrow like this, it's either because you have a zero IRR or have two IRRs like this, you just switch to NPV. You don't use IRR as a criteria to make a decision.